morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session in which we will discuss and debate the future of Israel studies. What does it really mean? It's very symbolic that we meet today here in Prague. It's very symbolic that we meet here in the Czech Republic in Prague. It's a country which is associated with figures such as Thomas and Jan Masaryk, who are commemorated in Jewish history as well as in the State of Israel. It also figures people such as Alexander Dubček and Václav Havel, who also contributed to an understanding of debate, of freedom, of academic discussion. We today are situated here in the square. The square is named after a young man called Jan Palach. Jan Palach set fire to himself in this square 50 years ago. He was a 21-year-old student of Charles University, and he did so in protest against the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia in August 1968. And that in itself was a reaction to the reformist policies of Dubček and his government in the early part of 1968, which has become known as the Prague Spring, which boasted of creating socialism with a human face. Now, why do I mention this? Because at that time, over 50 years ago, in the early part of 1968, many students from Charles University protested that Israel should be debated. The Soviet Union and the Warsaw Bloc had broken off diplomatic relations with Israel, and many Charles University students wanted to debate Israel. What was Israel? The point I'm making is that this conference and this session would not have taken place 50 years ago because there was no freedom of debate. And therefore, I return to what I said, it's highly symbolic, it's highly appropriate that we discuss Israel studies today in Jan Palach Square. We have a tremendous panel here which will give a variety of different opinions. We have Fania Oz-Salzberger, who is of Haifa University, who was the chair of the Prague Institute in Stockholm, was taught in Australia, and is very much associated with Israel studies. We have Ilan Troen of Brandeis and Ben Gurion University, who was really one of the founders of Israel studies globally, who founded the Summer Institute, whereby people are brought to Brandeis to learn about Israel studies and how to teach it. We have Marcela Zoufalá, who is, forgive my British mispronunciation. I read this morning that in the cabinet meeting yesterday in Israel that Bibi told his cabinet colleagues that he had this very pleasant meeting with the new Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland a few days ago, the Right Honourable Boris Yeltsin. So there are worse things than mispronunciation. I'm also delighted to welcome here Kumaraswamy of the Jawaharlal Nehru University, who will obviously inform us of the expansion of Israel studies in India. In fact, tomorrow there's a whole session which consists of many people from Delhi University in which this can be developed. My good friend Maryasis of the Institute of Oriental Studies in Moscow. Russia is a huge country, and it's Dima who has really been developing Israel studies in Russia. We in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe, in the States, we can see what's happening. But in Russia, there's a great potential, and Dina is leading the way. Okay, so let's go to the first point. This is not going to be a sort of presentation session, but hopefully I'll suggest some guidelines, some suggestions. Nothing is set in stone. We only have an hour, so there will be short answers, hopefully, and then it will be your chance to ask questions and to give contribution, and we'll take it from there. And hopefully we can end at 1:45. So, how did Israel Studies start? Where did it come from? What's its origin? The best person to answer this is Ilan Troen. If you can answer.
Yeah, I prefer to answer. Can you hear me? Maybe it's better that you can't. Here we go. Never mind, I'm going to talk anyway. This is the short answer. I learned as a freshman in college that the essay is about, was the Holy Roman Empire Holy, Roman, or an empire? It was the 3-minute answer, the 30-minute answer, the 3-hour essay, and the whole shelf of books. This is the 3-minute answer on Israel studies. It was an enormously written about topic from the beginning of the 20th century, beginning with the settlers writing about themselves. As it became a conflict after the Balfour, after the creation of the Mandate, the literature expanded enormously, and just think of all the commissions that were established. But if we really want to follow not the literature, the publicity, but when it entered the university, the answer is really in the 1990s. There were 47 people who met in Dartmouth College in 1987. There are 90 people who belong to the Association of Israel Studies in 1990. There are 2,500 people on the mailing list and about 600 people who pay dues each year. This organization is also an organization of the 21st century. That's when it really takes place. And it enters the university for a whole host of reasons. In large measure, because of the curiosity of what's going on in that land between the river and the sea. Now, that has to do with the conflict, but not only with the conflict. And in the 3-minute speech, I would offer you one of the most important reasons that I see is that Israel Studies was no longer a subject, an add-on to the history of Zionism. It was really a subject that became important to people, whether they are in India or in China, where it becomes West Asian studies, or because they're Christians, and because Israel, or the Holy Land, is terribly important to them. In fact, it's wonderful to have the session here. This is not as a department of our university, it's not Yeshiva University. It's Charles University, in a place that the Jewish population is very small. And in fact, what we did at Brandeis was train more than 300 people from 250 universities, and they will come and report to you that most of their students are not Jewish. If Israel Studies were a Jewish topic, it would fade away, it would disappear. There is something about what's taking place here that excites the imagination on a humanistic basis, in terms of political science, in terms of international relations, in terms of the place where Islam, Christianity, and Judaism have common, shared, and contentious roots. So the reasons for the growth of Israel Studies has to do with the diverse, multiple, sometimes conflicting curiosities that people across the world have about that place and how that place relates to them. Thus, a conference in Italy might talk about Libyan Jewry. There are 4 museums for Libyan Jewry in Italy, and that makes sense. It's a different set of topics in Prague, a different set of topics in London, a very different set of topics in Israel itself. One last comment is that many of us think we know something about Israel. I was part of the establishment of Israel Studies in Israel, and in 1995, Fania, who comes from Prague by 1 generation removed, and myself organized the first degree program of Israel Studies in Israel. Why? Because our kids didn't know enough about their own country. Surprising? I used to teach American Studies in the United States. Why? Because Americans don't know enough about their own country. So the reasons for studying Israel in one place are certainly very different than they are in another place. And I imagine that each one of you got up at the time that our chairman will have remaining, you will all tell some shared stories, but ultimately some different stories. There's probably no other place in the world that has such a magnet for diversity and intensity of the diversity as does the study of Israel, and one has to say Israel-Palestine.
Thank you very much. Fania, perhaps I can ask you another question. Teaching Israel studies is implicitly controversial because Israel is not the flavor of the month in many quarters and in many academic and intellectual quarters. How do you differentiate between critical academic endeavor and not being a part of the Hasbara campaign? How do you distinguish, how do you meander a way through?
Thank you, Colin. I must thank you also for the invitation to the conference and to the round table. And we try to be brief, although, as Ilan said, somehow miraculously we managed to put so much into the 3 minutes. I will try to do the same. The level of passion incorporated into Israel studies around the world is unparalleled by any other so-called area studies or cultural studies or geographical Asian studies or literary studies or historical studies. You know, I've been Googling just before this conference to check out how many Scottish studies centers are there in the world. I do Scottish studies. I love it. Princeton University has a Scottish studies center, so does Glasgow, not all the Scottish universities, by the way. How many centers of Scandinavian studies? And what about Latin American studies, the whole continent of Latin America outside of Latin America? And how about African studies outside of Africa? Give or take North America. You will be surprised. The energy, the dynamics, the sheer passion into which Israel itself was born are parallel in no small measure in centers for Israel studies around the globe, both within and without. Because the problem does not begin with demonstrating, trying to crash the lecture of somebody, some guest speaker from Israel or on a topic which is considered problematic. The problem, which is for me not a problem but a fascinating labyrinth of minds, is within. Because the very departments or centers or focuses or whatever of Israel studies anywhere in the world, most of all in Israel itself, if you take the initiators, the people who came up, like Ilan, who came up with a vision, and you take the donors, you know, we could have written a whole shelf of books about the history of the donors to Israel studies centers, the philanthropies, what they want, what they don't, how active are they, how hands-on are they? Will they struggle me if I invite a Palestinian and not a Palestinian to give a talk? Some of them will, some of them will not. And then we have the faculty, of course, and the students and the young researchers and so on and so forth. I am not acquainted with any other similar topic in the world, with the possible exception of theoretical physics, that carries with itself so much emotion and so much political complication. Now we have each and every complication in the book. The problematic overlap between Jewish and Israeli, the uneasy overlap between Israel studies and the multidisciplinary field. What exactly is this animal? The partial autonomy, of Hebrew literature that had its own roots, at times separate from Israel studies, and then they kind of built into each other, but it is a different genealogy altogether. The question of culture versus political history. The question of how to attract students and what to offer them, because Holocaust and the wars and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict sell more seats than Israeli literature and culture and cinema and the chant of Tel Aviv or Israeli Haifa. How can we sell more seats and yet keep it open? And once again, the hostility towards Israel studies, which I think is a very local and anecdotal thing. I remember we had one conference in Washington, D.C. a few years ago, in which different heads of Israel Studies centers from adjacent states in the United States had totally different experiences. Some of them had no political trouble at all, and others have had a few. From within campus, sometimes from outside campus. In my case, in Melbourne, at Monash University, the one problem was it was almost wholly Jewish. Almost everybody who came to teach and to study Jewish studies, Israel studies, were Jewish Australians. And that was a bit of a problem with regard to others. But also that there, like in some places in the United States, the pressure was towards more mamlachtiyut, more nationhood, more pro-Israel, hasbara, or whatever. I had one big conflict on this I will end, when a famous, but here he will remain unnamed, Israeli politician, intellectual, and macher, showed up at Monash University with an exhibition of photographs from Israel to be presented as he demanded, not requested, but demanded, in the university programs. When I saw those photos, my eyes went dark. This sounds better in Hebrew. Chashchu einai, because it was all soldiers and the Western Wall, and that only 3 women was a female officer brandishing a gun, Golda Meir and Rina Moore, the former Miss Universe. I thought I was going to bury myself, and we had to negotiate with both embassy and community in order to somehow keep this vulgarity at bay. Bottom line, whatever is born of passion will also attract high passions. And this is why I'm not worried about many of the so-called anti-Israel demonstrations around Israel's countries. And I'm so warm-hearted about every, not only non-Jewish, but Palestinian student, Asian student, African students from all over, who join us to study and then to teach Israel studies. And I think that anybody working in this kitchen should be able, and us staff people from Israel are able, I think all of you are, to stand the heat. I also think that the heat is becoming a little lower now, but this is the natural dynamic.
I'd like to ask 3 other participants to say a little about the genesis and the development of Israel studies in a particular region. So, Kumar, would you like to say something about India?
Thanks, Joanna, and thanks for it. In the Indian context, the middle-class Indians always had a fascination for a variety of reasons. Socialism is being a small country able to take on enemies, the others are a conflict, variety of reasons. So interest was always there, which became much more larger after relations were established in 1992. But there is one big problem in studying Israel. If you look at it, the Israeli studies has been approached through what I would call the European prism or the Abrahamic prism. And bulk of the Indian population is non-Abrahamic. They have absolutely no clue about Bible. And therefore, even if you talk about, if you say Islamic view of the Arab-Israeli conflict, even that is very limited. So how do you tell someone what is the concept of Jews and Judaism and Zionism and everything? The majority of people who think Jews are actually a part of Christianity. And that's your major problem you have to tackle. The second thing is, if you look at the European way, they largely look at either Holocaust or anti-Semitism. And if you look at from India, that's absolutely alien to both of us. So in the sense, in the Holocaust discourse, you always have a 4 types of people: the perpetrator, the victim, the bystanders, and the rescuers. India doesn't belong to any of them. How do you actually communicate something? It's not my problem. It's a European problem. So therefore, you don't have an historical understanding, you don't have an historical baggage. So either way, you're completely lost within the transfer. The third is your anti-Semitism. And if you look at the Indian context, historically it is absent. And there is no incident of anti-Semitism in over 2,000 years of history, except an incident in Goa under the Portuguese, which is continuation of Inquisition. Otherwise, India doesn't even know what is anti-Semitism is all about. So therefore, if you look at anti-Semitism, at least you can tell, we have to fight this kind of hatred against the other. And it's completely non-existent. So how do you tell someone what is Judaism, what is Israel, what is Zionism, and what is Israel studies, who has no clues about Bible, no clues about Holocaust, and no clues about anti-Semitism. And that is a major challenge for us. And if you go a step further, and pardon my bluntness, because I was in Israel for 10 years and I'm going to be a little bit of chutzpah in Berlin. So if you look at Israeli studies establishment, there is a difference between Israeli studies. While the Jews are the major consumer, distributor, and of the Israel's related interest, at least in the last 20 years, there is an enormous interest of the Goyim about Israel. I think if you look at the Israeli studies establishment, it is exclusive. It is not inclusive. While the leadership and interest of Israel has gone beyond Jewish nation, but that is not reflected in the official establishment which promotes Israeli studies. The European Association is a very, very important, notable exception. And that's why I'm more comfortable here than other institutions. Because if all you have to do is look at the people who are running the place. And I think that is where the difficulty is. So people always confuse when you say Israeli studies, it's only for the Israeli Jewish and things. It's no. Israel studies is anyone who studies Israel. I think that is not, I'm not able to communicate to my people there. If you look at the editorial board, if you look at all the people, it's exclusive. And therefore, when I come to my students and say, hey, you can also be in Israeli studies, you are not a Jewish person, you are not an Israeli, you can still be interested, it means a lot of us. But the real problem is, and I think whoever is running the Israel Studies program will have to look, there is world beyond River Jordan. And how do you come in? It applies to India, it applies to China, it applies to Japan and other places, where the Christian population is not there, so therefore you don't have a Judo-Christian heritage. So they are nowhere related to Holocaust. Anti-Semitism is almost a recent development because of migration and other issues. And how do you create an interest? And I think that is going to be the real challenge. For people like me, how do I ask people to study Israel? And I think this is going to be a challenge for me on a daily basis. I'm doing it for the last 20 years, from 1990. So this is a constant challenge. But India has an advantage because the middle class Indian has fascination for Israel. There is an enormous reason. So you can always find even anti-Muslim to Israeli respect for socialism, technology and everything. The whole spectrum, which may not be there in other places. And therefore, how do you tell people to be interested in Israel studies?
Ilan, would you like to speak on Russia?
Yeah. It's interesting, but in many ways it's similar to what you said. Because let's first of all try to understand that in Soviet Union there was a system that if you were a global power, you have to know everything about the whole world. So there's a huge system within the Soviet, by the time, Academy of Science. It's important to notice that there is the difference between the research work and the education. Education in universities, research within the framework of the Academy of Science institutions. So there was Oriental Studies Institute, Latin American Studies Institute, African Studies, European Studies, US and Canada Studies, so all over the world was covered. All the systems covered by this kind of institution that were studying the different regions of the world. So, and the Oriental Studies Institute, which is now year ago celebrated 200 years, of course, so it should be important that we study Israel. But after 67, how you can do it? The only way it was to create a laboratory, a research laboratory of anti-Zionism. It's a known trick. It's called something anti, then you can research it. Fine. This laboratory was created at the beginning of the 70s within the Oriental Studies Institute. I will tell you that now, in my days, now in the institute there are 400 people, researchers from all over the world. Even Australia, how we calculated that Australia is the Oriental Studies, the world is okay, we surround, but still. But Still, so it was, and since then we have this laboratory now, is the Department of Israel and Community Studies. So it survived the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and 2000s, all the different periods. So there is one point of study. First people who studied it were basically Arabs in their analysis. But still, the major idea was to study Israel as it is. It doesn't mean to Jewish, non-Jewish. No one thought about it. You have to study the country because you're on the Orient. You have to understand what's going on. The Middle East from Israeli point of view as well. Okay, they were the enemies by then, but you have to know your enemy well in order to know how to fight him. And then in the 90s there was a major switch, as you understand, and there is a major center in Moscow within the Moscow State University, which is called the Institute of Asian and African Studies. And in 1998, together with the University of Jerusalem, there was created a joint center of Israel, contemporary Israel, and Jewish studies within this institute. I was honored to be one of the first students of this class, exactly 21 years ago. And it was the first attempt to prepare people who know Hebrew, who understand different positions, and they study Israel from the modern point of view on different ways. There was, and it is important, it wasn't not connected to any Jewish community, to any Jewish or there were people, okay, there were people who were studying Japan, China, India, Turkey, Arab states, and Israel as well. Of course, there were Jews among them, me, for example, but I was the only one in the group. And since then, we have this education center, which is one of the major, but not the only one in Russia. Here we have from Tomsk, my friend, which they have, it's in the middle of Siberia. You don't want to go there. But Colin went once in February, it was not...
-26.
Yes. And in Kazan, in St. Petersburg, and obviously there are centers of educating the Middle East and the Israel Caucasus as well. So, once again, the major idea today is that we have to study Israel as it is, not because of the Jewish or non-Jewish, because Russia considers itself now, and wants to consider itself as a global power, as a major player in the Middle East. So we have to understand that we have the expertise in Israel as well, which is considered one of the major local players in the Middle East, even politically speaking. So that's the major idea, the major rationale that is based within the Israeli studies in Russia. But there is, of course, the gap between what was thought of and was created and the population and the understanding of the people why we are doing it. Because every one of my friends who are studying Israel, my students who are studying Israel today, and many experts who are working in these different kind of centers and studied Israel, they usually ask, "You're a Jew?" I say, "No." They say, "What the hell are you? Why?" And it's just because of the Israel studies. Because if you ask the person who studied in Japan, no one asks that. No one asks that. Say, okay, so, and the only answer we tell them, so come to any university where they study this kind of institute or this research institute, look, all the Japanese, they're from Japan, or the Chinese, they're from China, what was the case? So, but that's the major point, and it's important to mention that many diplomats who now serve in the Russian embassy in Israel, many of them went through the system of the Israeli science education. They have the Hebrew knowledge, they read, write, and speak Hebrew, more or less. But still, they know the Israeli perception on, even if they don't get it, but they know the Israeli perception of the situation, they can read the sources in the language it was written. And we have very wide system of joint conferences with our Arab and Iran friends within the institute, when we work together to understand this situation, how we grab the situation. And today it is a very interesting platform where you can meet people from all over the world in Moscow because of the connections of the experts. And being a part of that, finishing and being a part of the system today, you're connected. We're bringing our part of the puzzle of what's going on in the Middle East. That's how it works today in present-day Russia.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Colin, for a nice introduction and for mentioning also the rich history of Czech or Czechoslovak relation with Israel. Just for your curiosity, during the Prague Spring in 1968, which was of course after the Six-Day War and after the beginning of diplomatic relations between all Eastern Bloc and Israel. So students of this faculty launched petition and gathered around over 1,000 signatures, and the petition was calling for re-establishing the diplomatic relations. So this was I would say quite unusual. And during the Prague Spring also the censorship was released for a while, and so the students was able to publish the weekly Student who was covering Israel in almost every second issue in some way. I tried to engage into small analysis, and surprisingly it was very balanced reporting. It was not this, let's say, very celebratory or romanticized discourse, which is otherwise very present in Czech or Czechoslovak like discourse on Israel, which maybe will be revealed more on the other question. However, I think most of you are familiar with this special relation of Czech Republic to Israel. I think Joanna did call it turbo pro-Israeli. And all this it's necessary, of course, to contextualize in our long-term 20th century history, as Professor Weiss yesterday reminded us of the visit of Tomáš Masaryk in historic in the British Mandate of Palestine in 1927, which was actually first European diplomat or president who entered Israel and Palestine, and who visited actually both sides. Then this kind of, let's say, ethos of Masaryk was quickly picked by President Havel, who immediately during his presidential inauguration speech mentioned the necessity to re-establish diplomatic relations. And I think his second trip abroad was to Israel. There he brought many impressions, and it was published widely, so very positive impressions, I would say. And together with other underground intellectuals like Pavel Kohout or Milan Kundera, he was one who was widely shaping the discourse on Israel among the Czech public. And of course, we can only imply that Israel studies in the Czech Republic received very positive acceptance also due to this former work. However, I would say that recently we witnessed a certain weakening or disaffection somehow with lowering. We experience even the distancing discourse not only among the Czech Jewish community but also among the especially young Czech public. So I think this all goes hand in hand with the Western world trends, and let's see how it all developed. I agree very much with Professor Oz-Salzberger about this level of passion, which Israel studies and Israel, of course, require all around the world. I would say Israel is, I don't know who said it, but Israel is like fetish of our times, maybe. And I am always very surprised. I mean, people from Latin America who never travel abroad at all, but they are well informed about Israel-Palestinian conflict, and which is of course admirable. However, I think this uniqueness, it's kind of blessed and also curse of Israel studies. Not only because it's very hard to be on the worldwide stage for everyone, like for the scholars on Israel studies, but also for Israelis by themselves, but also because I would say that the research results which Israel studies as a discipline produce can lack the comparative perspective. And eventually, as those of you who are engaged in the qualitative research, maybe I'm coming from the field of cultural anthropology, so you may question yourself if how the results we produce are somehow proportionate, because we have no one to compare, as Israel is, of course, do not belong fully to its geographical region, and still doesn't belong anymore to Europe. So there is a certain fusion which of course make it unique, but also we always need to employ some more and more like self-reflection and being mindful in our research. I would just, last sentence, I would like to recall the Hillel Cohen last year keynote in London in European Association of Israel Studies Conference, which I was very grateful for, because even though he's a historian, he admitted that he employs self-reflexive methodology by studying 1948 in Israel, and he's like a kind of, let's say, he's questioning himself whether he's maybe selective to or framing differently his results of scholarship. Why I was grateful for that, because usually in cultural anthropology, in the qualitative research from 70s, we are like well aware of those practices. However, among historians, it's still very rare to admit that they would be also human beings. So I'm very grateful that we admit we are human beings. I will pass my microphone.
So just to finish what I began in the 2.5 minutes, I still have another half minute left. You've witnessed here incredible diversity. Let me give you some statistics. The journal that I edit goes to 3,200 libraries. 630 people have written for it so far, at least one essay. There were downloadings from 88 countries in the first few months of this year, countries with which Israel has no relations whatsoever, and most of them have no Jews whatsoever. And that's only one of the 4 journals that has Israel in its title: Israel Affairs, Journal of Israel History, and Israel Studies Review. And that doesn't count the American Historical Association Review, and it doesn't count sociology, and it doesn't count conflict resolution, and it doesn't count this, and it doesn't count that. So the ways in which people are curious about Israel in a formal way and can succeed in getting their research recognized by different disciplines is absolutely extraordinary. there must be some kind of law of inverse proportions. The smaller the country, the greater the publications or the interest. And that is a phenomenon. When we made a strategic decision when we started the Summer Institute, I'm glad to see a good number of people, graduates of the Summer Institute here, is that we would not offer them a template how to teach Israel. The most interesting part of the Institute, after we did all of our work and our travels, was to say, would you create your syllabus and share it with your colleagues and comment on each other's work? And the diversity of what we came up with and the reasons for it were absolutely fascinating. I don't think that there was one textbook that possibly could be written on Israel. You could do a textbook on Israeli history, but what about society? What about international relations? What about art? What about theater? What about economics? You can't fit it into the pages of one book. And I'm not going to challenge the European Association if they would dare come up with a paragraph statement as to what they're all about, who ought to be included, who ought to be excluded. It's an open book now. Someday that discussion might happen, but we're still very much in the period of expansion. And I was treated to a brilliant session on the teaching of Israel in the Arab world just before this. And they too have a fascinating story which all of us ought to get to know. So there are many stories, there are many reasons, there's a lot of diversity, and is it just geography that interests us? Probably not, because we sometimes publish about the Israeli diasporas, and this plural about Palestinians in Latin America, about Jews in Berlin. So that what we're dealing with is something that goes beyond the traditional definitions that are disciplinary, geographic, linguistic, and cultural. So how to define all of this, I don't know, but we're in the midst of something that's really expanding, and you all have a role and a place to play in it.
I'm aware that time is very much slipping away. We haven't had lunch yet. So I'll open it up to the floor now, even though there were more topics for discussion. And we'll see how things develop from there. So questions, please, contributions, discussions. Can someone take the microphone?
My question is, what are the institutional mechanisms for blocking donors' impact on Israel studies and other political?
Wait a minute.
Donors and others who support Israel studies are pro-Israel. My question is, what are the institutional mechanisms that they can block influence, ideology on Israel studies, so they will be impartial, scientific, as much as possible? I mean, even without any social scientist or other scientist, always is influenced by ideology, interest and so on. But we are talking about Israel studies as a discipline, right? This is the discussion. And as a discipline, the question is, how can you neutralize the effect of donors who are pro and other political activists who are pro-Israel?
Shalom, Ashulcha. Thank you for your question. And maybe other members here will have different viewpoints, but this also allows me to answer Colin's previous question, which Israeli chutzpah I ignored in the first round, and that is the whole pro-Israel, anti-Israel thing. You know, you have used the word pro-Israel in the sense of hasbara, in the sense of an unacademic bias, ideological, hyper-nationalist attitude towards Israel studies. This is unacademic, of course, but I would like to say here quite out loud that in my mind the term pro-Israel is deeply mistaken. we should not be using it. Because anyone who deals with Israel as an existing entity is by definition pro-Israel, the way anyone who studies geometry must be pro-geometry. You cannot study a topic if you are not acknowledging the current existence and possibly the future existence of the topic that you are studying. The problem is not pro-Israel or anti-Israel. You know, I'm neither pro-Israel nor anti-Israel, I'm pro-peace. Of course, in order to be pro-peace, you have to be pro-Israel in the basic sense of the existence of Israel, which also allows, I'm now going left rather than right as your question is directed after I began with it, it also allows us to answer where do we draw the line of politicization in both directions, the so-called pro-Israel and anti-Israel, or better still, or deeper still, in the sense of needing to show Israel off in its best colors, which when governmental is called Hasbara, and when academic is called bad research or bad teaching. Where do we draw the line between this and an engaged, never neutral, never objective? This is the humanities and the social sciences. You can argue about the social sciences, I come from the humanities, there is no such thing. It's a choice of novellas to teach in your Hebrew literature class, which is political. It's the choice of whether to have another course on the Arab-Israeli wars or a course about Tel Aviv at Monash University, which is political. It goes way beyond methodology, it goes way beyond code. We are all, to some degree, biased. The question is how to do it right. And how to do it right, in my mind, to put it as simply as possible, is to draw the line, and this is politics, between Israel's existence, right to exist, and future right to exist. We can argue about the past, probably, and everything else. I have to mention my father, I'll do it again tonight, but when he was once asked, what is Judaism to you in one word? Can you define Judaism in one word? Any definition can go for Israel, by the way. His one word won't say, yes, I can. And the one word is argument.
I disagree with that.
If you, and we academics, we do not reflect, we do something else, we deflect, we don't reflect. But if we reflect and deflect argument in everything we teach, we seem to be on a good track. Neither pro nor anti, but on a good track.
I'll just make a personal observation, because when my promotion came up, it was 10 years ago, I was accused of being passionate about Israel. So, the committee was questioning me with all my writings. I said, I'm passionate about Israel studies, or studying Israel, not about Israel. I think one has to make a distinction between the two. And it's as simple as it's a subject. But you can ask me, why don't you study Cuba? Valid question, because Israel, I'm not a Jewish, I'm a million miles away. But that you can question. Why do you study Israel, not some X, Y, and Z? But we have to make a distinction between studying Israel as a subject and passionate about it and passionate about Israel. I think that is good. But if you get a little bit further, Israel has a multi-dimensional thing. Anything you talk, from Jerusalem issue to Tel Aviv, anything you want to say. So as an academic, we can put all the things on the table and ask the student, you draw your own conclusion depending upon your ideological preferences. So if you put more on the table, and at least we'll be less biased in that sense, so nobody will accuse us of pro-Israel or anti-Israel or anything. But in my own campus, I have to confront anti-Israeli sentiments on a daily basis. There's a poster in the student union election, you will find the Gaza one. Nothing to do with the student union election. So one has to confront it on a daily basis. But the only way one can do is put everything on a table, you draw your own conclusion.
And it's a direct answer to your question, Professor Smukal. It's in Russia, it's a very interesting system. Most of us, we use the state budget. or the funds that we receive there, mainly we apply for the general grants, scientific grants. The Jewish or like Israeli grants, it's minority, and they usually come together with the bigger issue. So being a part of the general system, no one tells us what to do. We're on our own, and then it goes to our personal professionalism and so on. So even when Jewish grants are coming, when they are going together with the general grants, they take the rules. They are rule takers. That's the answer.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about donors, Sammy. Donors tend to be very rich, and they tend to be smart and have good education. They know there are limits if you want to give so much and so many $1 million to Harvard University, that what they can do and what they can't do, and Harvard will sometimes tell them, as they told Saudi Arabia not so long ago. I'm also not concerned about states. I know some people who are very radical who won the Israel Prize. Maybe even you, maybe even this past year, Debbie Bernstein, who made a reputation out of being a radical. I'm not concerned about states nor about donors as I am about my colleagues. That if there is censorship or if there's argumentation, it comes from colleagues in the faculty and other faculties, sometimes in the department, and the real fights are not with donors. The real contest is within our own universities and the culture of our universities.
Okay. Next question, yes.
Hi, I'm from Israel Studies in Copenhagen University, and I'm from Israel Studies in Copenhagen University. In part of our studies that the students study Hebrew, they go for semester to Erasmus to Israel, to study in Israel. In the last few years, they don't get visas to Israel. Okay, they are not media supporters, nothing. But you know, if they publish a post, if they went to occupied territories, if they spoke to Israeli NGO, they are denied for 5 and 10 years. And I wanted to ask if any other Israeli study center around here, if anybody else is having this problem.
Sure.
Yeah, I have only a very quick comment and question.
You just pass the microphone.
I don't want to ruin a lot of fun.
They don't hear you. They don't hear you.
Can I?
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
So I don't want to be pessimistic, but I know that Israeli studies is developed and very unique, and it's all over the world, and it's a very important and unique discipline. However, to be more specific, I'm actually, because I'm going to talk about Israeli studies in the Arab world. I just just to give my presentation in my panel, and my question to you is, what next? So I know that all over the world you organize conferences everywhere. More? Okay. That better if I talk like this. No. Okay. So we're working as Arabs. We're working individually. So there is no collaboration between Arabs or any other with any other institutions around the world. So we are participating in conferences individually. We don't have any support. And I believe that the Arab side is a very important and active side in the Israeli studies program. So just like she was talking about the center in Copenhagen, I noticed, because I was a postdoctoral fellow in Cambridge, that we have a very few number of students. However, in Egypt, we have thousands of students who are interested in Israeli studies. And we have programs in Israel, Jewish, Hebrew studies. However, we don't have any support from institutions abroad. So we're working individually, we're fighting our institutions, we are trying to squeeze in so hard. So I was wondering if there is any support that you can offer as the EAIS or the AIS for Arabs generally, Arab young scholars generally, because we actually need this. Thank you.
That's a very important question. Who would like to respond first of all? Yeah, it's fair enough. I mean, personally, I'm very sympathetic to what you're saying, and maybe it's something that has to be discussed with the European Association and with some of us, but that's a very important point that you make, absolutely. Right, it's 22, 5 minutes to go, as I say. All right.
Just a comment on what Fania was. Yeah, it's just a comment about what Fania said, which I found a bit disturbing, I must admit. I thought, if I understood well, that you draw a line that I think was not really the correct line. Because you said that Israel studies is a research organization that recognizes Israel as a state, its existence, its future existence. The question is, what do you mean by Israel? Is it Israel as a Jewish state, as part of it, or is it Israel as a binational state? And the question is, why not to think about two possibilities in the future?
No academic department in the world, I hope, will ever need to recognize or not to recognize an existing country, because this is not for academic departments. So I think we agree basically that the very notion of having to take on board the questions of Israel's, let's leave aside which Israel, right to exist, which is my red line also politically, simply because for me questioning Israel's right to exist, and I'm not saying which kind of Israel. Right? Israel of today is not my kind of Israel at all. I still grant it like this. Is anti-Semitic. This is my line of anti-Semitism. There's no other state, it will call for Germany's and so on and so forth. We know the arguments. The very right to exist has never been in question. And of course, what I take out of this equation is arguments about the way the state of Israel came to be. This is an academic topic, questions of international legal legitimation, questions of moral philosophy, you name it. But to my mind, almost as a simple algorithm, anyone who does not want Israel to be is likely to spend very little time studying Israel and making it in order to destroy what you study. I don't know. I mean, it is a pretty instinctive but also pretty straightforward thing. And then within the huge border I've been describing, because we liberals do have lines around our agora, but these are very broad lines. I can put in those donors that want Hasbara, and then we'll have to wrestle with them, but from within. And I will put in the BDS who wants to punish Israel sorely until it becomes a better Israel, or a two-nation Israel. I think it's a two-nation Israel. I don't know if the word Israel will continue to exist, to be shared, or to call Israel. I don't know. My field of play is very, very broad, both politically and academically. The only people I would not feel terribly comfortable about playing with politically or academically are the people who doesn't want this thing to have been at all, or to be today, or to be in the coming future. I think this is fair enough. Going back to geometry, you cannot teach geometry if you don't want the geometry to exist in the universe. We're on the same line.
I'm really sorry that we have to finish. Thank you for coming. Thank you for delaying your